The journey home, it's a concept that hits home for all of us, right? Home isn't just a roof over our heads. It's about belonging, identity, and connection. For thousands of years, stories about finding our way back home have sparked our imaginations. They echo our deepest desires and the struggles we face against forces that try to keep us lost. Take Odysseus, for example. When he left the smoldering ruins of Troy, he thought he'd be back in just a few weeks. But instead, he ended up on a wild 10-year adventure filled with monsters, gods, temptations, and transformations. Why does his tale still resonate with us after 3,000 years? Maybe it's because we see bits of ourselves in him, the part that longs for home while craving adventure, the part that wrestles with duty versus desire, and the part that confronts both outside challenges and inner demons on the road to wholeness. Even today, we see Odysseus' story in the soldier coming back from war, changed forever by their experiences. In the refugee, braving dangerous waters for safety, and in the wanderer trying to find their true self again. At its heart, the hero's journey is all about transformation. We set out as one person and come back as another, shaped by what we've been through, what we've lost, and what we've learned. This epic isn't just an ancient adventure. It's a reflection of the human experience itself. To really get this timeless tale, we need to understand the world that birthed a world that was already ancient by Homer's time. The events likely took place around 1200 BCE, during the tail end of what we now call the Bronze Age. This was a complex world filled with palaces, trade routes, writing, and powerful city-states. But then, disaster struck. Between 1200 and 1150 BCE, civilizations across the eastern Mediterranean faced a massive collapse. Great cities fell, empires crumbled, writing systems vanished, and trade networks fell apart. The exact reasons are still debated: climate change, earthquakes, invasions, or maybe a mix of all of these. But the outcome was clear. A complex international system gave way to what scholars refer to as the Greek Dark Age. During this time, the tales of the Trojan War and its aftermath were passed down orally, generation after generation. When these stories were finally written down, probably in the 8th century BCE, they captured memories of a lost golden age, shaped by years of oral tradition. This gives the poem a unique perspective. It's set in the Bronze Age world of kings and heroes, but crafted in the emerging world of city-states, colonization, and a revival of literacy. Archaeologists have long debated how much truth lies behind Homer's epic. Heinrich Schliemann's discovery of Troy in the 1870s showed that the city wasn't just a myth. Excavations at places like Mycenae, Pylos, and Ithaca revealed palace complexes that match descriptions in the poems. But this isn't just history. It's something deeper: a cultural memory turned into art, blending myth with reality, the divine with the human, and the fantastical with the painfully real. Sing to me, O Muse, of the man of many devices. These iconic words kick off one of the greatest literary works in history. But here's the kicker: we still don't know who actually wrote them. Who was Homer? Was he a single genius poet? A group of bards under one name? Or even a woman, as some folks have suggested? Honestly, it's a mystery we might never crack. Ancient stories paint Homer as a blind poet from Ionia, which is now part of western Turkey. 7 cities claim to be his birthplace, and his name might even come from a word that means hostage or one who follows. Regardless of the truth, Homer symbolizes the peak of a rich oral poetic tradition, one that made it possible to create and share complex epics without writing them down. So how did this all work? Homeric poetry used something called formulaic composition. This wasn't just about memorizing set texts. Poets had to master a huge collection of metrical phrases, repeated scenes, and traditional story patterns that they could mix and match during their performances. These poets, known as auidos or singers, were like living libraries, recreating the epic anew each time while keeping its core structure and themes intact. They didn't just tell stories. They preserved their culture's values, history, and identity. Fast forward to the 8th century BCE, when the game changed with the invention of alphabetic writing. This breakthrough made it possible to finally write down these oral epics. Whether this was at the behest of a ruler like Pisistratus of Athens, or through some other means, it forever changed human culture. The text we read today still carries the marks of its oral roots. Phrases like wine-dark sea and gray-eyed Athena pop up repeatedly. Familiar scenes follow predictable patterns, and narrative techniques help with memory and performance. But it also shows signs of a cohesive artistic vision that only a master poet or poets could create. This ancient masterpiece isn't just a simple adventure story. Its structure is as clever as its hero, using advanced narrative techniques that would shape storytelling for ages. One of the coolest choices Homer made was to start in medias res, or in the middle of things. Instead of kicking off with Odysseus leaving Troy, we meet him in his 7th year of captivity on Calypso's island. The earlier adventures, the Cyclops, the Sirens, Scylla and Charybdis, are shared later through Odysseus's own storytelling to the Phaeacians. This creates a layered timeline. The poem's 24 books cover about 40 days of present time, but they also dive into a decade of wandering through flashbacks. It's a narrative style that feels surprisingly modern in its complexity. The story also uses something called ring composition, where themes and motifs show up and then reappear in reverse order, forming a symmetrical pattern. It starts and ends with divine gatherings. Telemachus's quest for news about his father mirrors Odysseus's own journey home. The hospitality Telemachus receives from Nestor and Menelaus contrasts sharply with the disrespect shown by the suitors back home. These patterns aren't just for show. They create meaningful contrasts and parallels that deepen our understanding of the poem's themes. The language itself reflects this complexity, written in dactylic hexameter 6 metrical feet per line, with each foot typically containing one long syllable, followed by 2 short ones. The Greek text has a unique rhythm that's both artistic and memorable. This meter became the gold standard for epic poetry in the Western tradition. When we look at this epic alongside its companion piece, the Iliad, we see some intriguing differences. While the Iliad dives into themes of wrath, glory, and death on the battlefield, the Odyssey takes us on a broader emotional and geographical journey. It's not just about martial glory, it's about survival. It's not about dying nobly, but living wisely. It's not about conquering others, but conquering oneself. This is the beauty of Homer's work. It transcends time and continues to resonate with us today. Whether you're diving into the depths of human experience or exploring the complexities of identity, these stories remind us of the journeys we all take, both outward and inward. At the heart of this epic tale is Odysseus, a hero like no other. He embodies a new kind of heroism that has stood the test of time. In the Iliad, he plays a supporting role, an able warrior and trusted advisor, but often overshadowed by bigger names like Achilles and Ajax. His true moment shines through after that story wraps up, when he comes up with the brilliant idea of the Trojan horse, the clever trick that finally brings down Troy after 10 long years of stalemate. This focus on brains over brawn is what really sets Odysseus apart. His name even hints at trouble and cunning, possibly linked to the Greek verb odysseustai, which means to be wrathful against or to hate, but also carries a whiff of mischief and deception. Homer drives this point home with Odysseus's many titles. He's Polytropos, the man of many turns, Polymedes, of many devices, and Polymelos, of various wiles. These traits, rather than just strength or speed, define his heroism. This shift towards valuing intelligence reflects the changing world after the Trojan War, where the ability to navigate tricky social and supernatural challenges becomes more important than simply conquering cities. Odysseus symbolizes survival through adaptability, a hero for uncertain times. But here's the catch. Odysseus's greatest strength also turns out to be his biggest flaw. His cleverness often leads to hubris, which bites him hard during the Cyclops episode. He can't help but reveal his true name to the blinded Polyphemus, an act of pride that brings Poseidon's wrath down on him and dooms his crew to years of hardship. There's a fascinating duality to Odysseus that makes him so relatable. He's the devoted husband who turns down immortality to return to Penelope, yet he's also the wanderer who spends years in the arms of other women. He's the loving father who sheds tears at the sight of his son, but he's also the commander whose reckless choices cost his entire crew their lives. He's both the master storyteller who enchants the Phaeacians and the master deceiver who plays tricks on friends and foes alike. This complexity makes Odysseus the first truly psychological hero in Western literature, a guy whose internal battles are just as gripping as his external adventures. His journey isn't just about crossing treacherous seas. It's also about navigating the stormy waters of his own nature. While Odysseus fights against gods and monsters to make his way home, his kingdom of Ithaca is in turmoil, facing a crisis that threatens its very foundation. Imagine Ithaca as Homer paints it, a rocky island kingdom off Greece's western coast. It's not the wealthiest or biggest place, but it's where Odysseus feels a deep connection. The palace that once stood for order is now a hotspot of chaos. With Odysseus gone for 20 years, 108 young nobles from Ithaca and nearby islands have taken over his palace. They claim to be vying for Penelope's hand in marriage, but their actions reveal their true colors. They're not honorable suitors, but parasites, draining the resources of their absent king. They feast on Odysseus's livestock daily, harass the palace servants, plot to kill Telemachus, and show utter disrespect for the customs of hospitality that hold their society together. As one character points out, there is no longer any respect for the guest friend or suppliant, or even the gods who dwell in the wide heaven. This situation highlights a deep social and political breakdown. Without Odysseus, there's no clear authority to maintain order. Telemachus is too young and inexperienced to take charge. Penelope's uncertain marital status leaves the future unclear. The elders of Ithaca are either unwilling or unable to reign in the young nobles. The crisis in Ithaca serves as a microcosm for larger themes of social order and chaos. It raises crucial questions. What happens to a community when real authority vanishes? How fragile are the customs and laws that hold society together? Who steps up to ensure justice when traditional structures crumble? The economic fallout from this crisis is also significant. The suitor's extended stay represents a huge drain on the royal household's wealth, resources that would take generations to build up. When Odysseus finally returns, he'll find not just his family in jeopardy, but his entire livelihood hanging by a thread. At the center of this crisis is Penelope, trying to juggle resistance and compromise. Her situation really highlights how vulnerable women can be in a world where their social standing relies on male protection, with no husband, father, or grown son to back her up. She's left to navigate this tough spot using her smarts and some clever delaying tactics. For Telemachus, this crisis is a painful part of growing up. Raised without a father in a household under siege, he's on a quest to find his place and voice. His journey to learn about Odysseus is just as much about figuring out who he is as it is about discovering his father's fate. And no understanding of this epic is complete without acknowledging the divine aspect. The gods aren't just distant figures. They're actively involved in human affairs, shaping events in ways we can see and feel. Olympus acts like a divine mirror to our society, with its own politics, conflicts, and alliances. Zeus is the top dog, but each god has their own agenda. This creates a fascinating mix of divine will and human choices that lies at the heart of the story. Odysseus' fate hangs in the balance between two powerful divine forces: Athena's unwavering support and Poseidon's relentless hatred. These gods are more than just supernatural players. They embody cosmic principles that Odysseus reflects. Athena, the goddess of wisdom and strategy, sees a kindred spirit in Odysseus, a mortal who represents her values of intelligence and craftiness. Her help comes not from removing obstacles, but from offering guidance and timely interventions when it counts. Poseidon, on the other hand, is fueled by anger over Odysseus blinding his son Polyphemus. As the god of the sea, Poseidon symbolizes the wild forces of nature that threaten human order. His opposition creates the central tension of Odysseus's journey, forcing him to navigate between cosmic forces that are beyond his control. Beyond those personal connections with the divine, there's a bigger religious picture to consider. The world of Homer is built on clear spiritual rules. The gods expect proper worship and hospitality, and they're quick to punish those who step out of line while rewarding those who show piety. Family bonds and oaths are upheld, and the sacred practice of hospitality, or xenia, is a big deal. Zeus, known as Zeus Xenios, is the protector of guests and those seeking help. When the Cyclops and the suitors break these customs, they're seen as enemies of divine order, and they deserve whatever punishment comes their way. But here's where it gets interesting. The link between fate, Moira, and divine will isn't always clear-cut. Even Zeus admits there are limits to what the gods can do. When people suffer more than what's destined for them, he points to their own mistakes rather than a divine plan. This opens the door for human responsibility in a world ruled by the gods. The poem creates a moral universe where people can make meaningful choices within the limits they didn't set, and where divine justice often plays out through natural consequences rather than just supernatural intervention. The gods, despite their power, are relatable. They deal with jealousy, pride, compassion, and anger. They have favorites, hold grudges, and sometimes change their minds. This makes the cosmic order of the poem feel familiar and relatable, rather than completely foreign. With all this in place, the historical context, the poet, the structure, the hero, the crisis at home, and the divine framework, we can dive into the twin journeys at the heart of the epic: Telemachus' quest for his father and Odysseus' long journey home. Only now, After establishing the situation in Ithaca and following Telemachus on his journey of discovery, does Homer finally introduce us to Odysseus himself. We find him not in the midst of heroic action, but in a state of profound suspension, stranded on the island of Ogygia, captive to the nymph goddess Calypso. For 7 years, Odysseus has lived in this beautiful prison. Calypso's island represents paradise in material terms. A lush garden with fragrant cypress trees, plentiful food, a warm bed, and the love of an immortal being. She has even offered Odysseus what most mortals can only dream of: eternal life, ageless and undying, if he will stay with her as her consort. Yet we discover him sitting on the shore, gazing out at the sea, weeping for home. Day after day he returns to this spot, his tears never exhausted, his longing undiminished by time or comfort. Calypso's paradise has become his purgatory. This striking image, the man who turns down immortality because it means losing his identity, captures the essence of Odysseus. What really is identity if not the mix of our connections, our past, and our role in the community? Ogygia may give him comfort, but it robs him of his social self. No one in Ithaca would know what happened to him. His name would fade from memory. He'd be cut off from the relationships that make life meaningful. Calypso herself presents a fascinating study in immortal psychology. Unlike the monsters Odysseus has faced, she genuinely loves him. She has rescued him from certain death, nursed him back to health, and offered him everything within her considerable power. Her island, which she tends alone, reflects both her divine capacity for creation and her fundamental isolation. When Hermes arrives with Zeus's command to release Odysseus, Calypso's response drips with a bitter awareness of divine double standards. Male gods routinely pursue mortal women, she argues. Yet when a goddess loves a mortal man, they cannot abide it. Her complaint highlights the gendered politics of Olympus and perhaps expresses Homer's subtle critique of patriarchal power. Despite her reluctance, Calypso assists Odysseus in building a raft to leave her island. She provides tools, materials, provisions, and even sailing directions. Her final gift, clothing that keeps him warm and dry, represents her lingering care, even as she surrenders him to his chosen fate. The Calypso episode crystallizes a central theme of the epic: the tension between temptation and homecoming. Throughout his journey, Odysseus faces variations on this choice: comfort versus struggle, present pleasure versus future identity, the extraordinary versus the ordinary. Each time, after various delays and diversions, he recommits to Ithaca, to Penelope, to his human, mortal life with all its limitations and connections. This choice gains particular resonance because Odysseus's epithet polytropos, man of many turns or many ways, suggests his capacity for adaptation, even transformation. He could become many things, inhabit many lives. Yet he insists on returning to his specific life, his particular identity. His flexibility of mind exists in dynamic tension with his unwavering commitment to home. As his raft disappears over the horizon, we leave Calypso on her island, an immortal being forced to confront the transience that defines human experience. Her love for Odysseus has brought her closer to understanding mortality, with all its poignancy and urgency. Perhaps this too is part of the hero's legacy, changing even the divine beings he encounters by embodying the particular dignity of human limitation. Freedom from Calypso's island does not mean freedom from danger. 17 days into his voyage, as land finally appears on the horizon, disaster strikes. Poseidon, returning from a visit to the Ethiopians, spots Odysseus on his raft and erupts in rage. The god of the sea has neither forgotten nor forgiven Odysseus for blinding his son Polyphemus. What follows is one of the epic's most vivid sequences, a storm of literally divine proportions. Poseidon summons winds from all directions simultaneously, raises mountainous waves, and shrouds everything in impenetrable clouds. The careful construction of Odysseus's raft comes apart plank by plank. The sea itself seems to rise against him with conscious malevolence. This storm represents the terrifying power of natural forces, the chaos and violence that lie just beneath the surface of the orderly cosmos. For ancient maritime cultures, the sea embodied both life-sustaining opportunity and ever-present danger. Every voyage was an act of courage, a temporary triumph over elemental forces that could reclaim the traveler at any moment. Odysseus' response reveals both his heroic qualities and his hard-earned wisdom. Unlike earlier in his journey, when he might have defied the god directly, he now recognizes the futility of fighting Poseidon's domain on Poseidon's storms. Instead of struggling against impossible odds, he adapts. When his raft finally breaks apart completely, he strips off the clothes Calypso gave him, which now drag him down, and rides a single beam like an experienced horseman. The sea goddess Ino, also called Leucothea, appears, taking pity on the struggling hero. She offers her veil as a magical flotation device, instructing him to discard it once he reaches shore. This divine assistance, coming just when Odysseus has exhausted his natural strength, exemplifies a recurring pattern in the epic. The gods help those who help themselves to the utmost extent of their abilities. For 2 days and nights, Odysseus struggles through the raging sea. Here we see the hero stripped to his essential qualities: physical endurance, mental resilience, strategic thinking, and the will to survive. Gone are the trappings of kingship, the company of loyal men, even the clothes on his back. What remains is the core of the hero, the bear man fighting against oblivion. When he finally approaches the shore of Phaeacia, a new obstacle appears. The coastline offers only jagged rocks where the waves crash with bone-crushing force. Again, Odysseus must think quickly, calculating where a river meets the sea, offering a potential landing spot. Swimming parallel to the coast, fighting exhaustion and despair, he finally finds a protected inlet. Reaching land represents more than physical salvation. It marks Odysseus' transition from the fluid, chaotic realm of Poseidon to the solid, ordered world of human society. His crawl from the water onto the beach, where he collapses in utter exhaustion, evokes both birth imagery and the evolutionary journey from sea to land. Odysseus has survived not just a storm, but a symbolic death and rebirth. Finding shelter beneath 2 intertwined olive trees one wild, one cultivated Odysseus creates a nest of leaves and falls into a profound sleep. This humble bed represents his position between worlds, nature and civilization, divine hostility and human hospitality, the wild sea and the ordered community. After 20 days of continuous struggle, he rests at last, ready to emerge into a new phase of his journey. The Poseidon episode demonstrates how the epic combines realistic detail with cosmic significance. Homer's description of the storm, swimming techniques, and coastal hazards reflects intimate knowledge of Mediterranean maritime conditions. Yet these physical challenges simultaneously function as spiritual and psychological trials. The storm is both a natural disaster and divine retribution, both an external threat and an internal struggle. Through these layered meanings, Odysseus' survival acquires moral and philosophical dimensions. He endures not just through physical strength, but through qualities of mind and spirit. His tenacity, adaptability, and refusal to surrender, even when stripped of all advantages, establish him as a new kind of hero, one whose greatness lies not in glorious victory, but in the simple, profound achievement of continuing to exist against overwhelming odds. If the Calypso episode explores temptation and the storm sequence tests endurance, the Phaeacian interlude examines something equally essential: the reintegration of the isolated hero into human society. After years of captivity and days of solitary struggle against the elements, Odysseus must remember how to exist among people, how to speak, behave, and present himself in ways that earn acceptance rather than rejection. This process begins with one of the poem's most charming scenes. Princess Nausicaa, daughter of the Phaeacian king and queen, has come to the river mouth near where Odysseus sleeps. Prompted by Athena through a dream, she brings the palace laundry to wash, including her own clothing, with thoughts of future marriage subtly on her mind. After washing and spreading the garments to dry, Nausicaa and her handmaidens play a ball game. Their shouts awaken Odysseus, who emerges from the bushes naked, caked with salt, wild-looking after his ordeal at sea. The handmaidens scatter in fear, but Nausicaa alone stands her ground, emboldened by Athena. The encounter that follows showcases Odysseus's diplomatic genius. Though desperate, he recognizes that approaching the princess directly might frighten her. Instead, he keeps his distance and delivers a speech of exquisite tact, comparing her to the goddess Artemis, asking for basic assistance, and appealing to her future happiness in marriage. He transforms himself from the threatening stranger to a worthy suppliant through the power of language alone. Nausicaa responds with a matching graciousness. She offers clothing, food, directions to the palace, and practical advice about approaching her parents. Her composure and generosity, especially remarkable in one so young, establish her as an exemplar of proper treatment of strangers. If the suitors in Ithaca represent the violation of hospitality norms, Nausicaa embodies their perfect fulfillment. Beneath this formal exchange runs a current of unacknowledged attraction. Homer subtly indicates Nausicaa's interest in the mysterious foreigner. Her comment to her handmaidens that she wouldn't mind a husband like him. Her hope that he might stay in Phaeacia. For his part, Odysseus recognizes her exceptional qualities, paying her the highest compliment he can offer when he compares her to a young palm tree he once saw at Apollo's shrine in Delos. Yet both understand the impossibility of any deeper connection. Odysseus's heart remains fixed on home. Nausicaa, for all her youthful fascination, maintains the decorum proper to her station. Their interaction exemplifies a bittersweet recognition of what might have been under different circumstances, a road not taken, gracefully acknowledged and set aside. Following Nausicaa's advice, Odysseus approaches the palace indirectly, receiving Athena's assistance in the form of a concealing mist as he enters the city. The Phaeacian palace itself represents the pinnacle of civilized existence, gleaming with bronze, silver, and gold, surrounded by perpetually fruiting orchards, attended by skilled servants. The royal couple, Alcinous and Arete, preside over an island untouched by war, blessed with exceptional ships that cross the sea, swift as a bird or thought itself. When Odysseus enters as a suppliant, grasping Queen Arete's knees in the traditional posture of request, the Phaeacians respond with model hospitality. They offer food, drink, and lodging before even asking his name or business. they promise safe passage to his destination. They treat him not as a suspicious foreigner, but as a guest under divine protection, which, given Athena's involvement, he truly is. The following day, the Phaeacians honor their guest with athletic games. When one young athlete insults Odysseus, suggesting he looks more like a merchant than a sportsman, the hero responds by easily winning the discus throw, demonstrating that his strength and athletic prowess remain intact despite his recent ordeal. This small victory foreshadows his eventual triumph over the young suitors at home. The evening feast brings the pivotal moment of the Phaeacian episode. The court bard Demodocus sings of the Trojan War, first of a quarrel between Odysseus and Achilles, later of the Trojan horse stratagem that Odysseus devised. Hearing these tales of his former glory, Odysseus weeps behind his cloak, moved by memories of friends lost and hardships endured. King Alcinous notices his guest's distress and gently asks, the question that transitions the epic from third-person narration to first-person account, "Who are you? Tell us your name." In response, Odysseus finally reveals his identity and begins the tale of his wanderings since leaving Troy, a narrative that will occupy the next 4 books of the epic. This moment of revelation carries enormous emotional weight. For the first time since leaving Calypso's island, Odysseus publicly reclaims his name and identity. He steps out of anonymity into his own legend, bridging his past glory and his present circumstances. The attentive, admiring Phaeacian audience represents a first step toward the restoration of his social standing, a receptive community that acknowledges his trials and celebrates his resilience. The Phaeacian episode thus serves multiple narrative functions. It provides Odysseus with a sympathetic audience for his tale, creating the frame story that allows his earlier adventures to be recounted. It demonstrates the proper functioning of hospitality to contrast with its perversion by the suitors. It shows Odysseus relearning social skills that years of isolation had forced him to set aside. More subtly, the Phaeacians represent an idealized society, a kind of halfway point between the magical realms Odysseus has traversed and the flawed, complex human world of Ithaca. Their exceptional ships, their blessing by the gods, their freedom from ordinary toil, all place them at the border between the mundane and the marvelous. They serve as a transitional space for Odysseus, allowing him to process his extraordinary experiences before returning to ordinary human society. When Odysseus concludes his tale, the Phaeacians load him with gifts more treasure than he would have received from his share of Troy's plunder had he returned directly. They deliver him asleep to the shores of Ithaca, gently placing him and his new wealth on the beach before departing. This peaceful transition from guest friend to returned king contrasts sharply with the violent homecoming he must now undertake. The Phaeacian interlude thus completes Odysseus's emergence from isolation and anonymity. Having survived divine imprisonment and natural catastrophe, having reclaimed his name and shared his story, he now stands ready to reclaim his place in the human world, not as a supplicant seeking acceptance, but as a king determined to restore justice to his domain. Seated among the Phaeacians, Odysseus, their honored guest in a bright hall far from home, begins to share his story. His voice, not used to long speeches after years of solitude, carries the weight of memories he's kept buried for so long. The quiet attention of his audience matches our own as we finally hear from the hero about the lost decade between the fall of Troy and his time on Calypso's island. "I am Odysseus, son of Laertes," he boldly states, claiming his identity for the first time since leaving Ogygia. This act of naming himself is truly brave. In a world where names hold power, Odysseus knows the risks of revealing who he is. He learned that the hard way when his proud declaration to the Cyclops stirred Poseidon's anger. But here, surrounded by potential allies, he takes back his name and the story that goes with it. What comes next isn't just a simple timeline of events. It's a carefully crafted tale. Odysseus shows he's just as skilled at storytelling as he is at strategy. He picks, arranges, and highlights events to create the biggest impact on his audience. Whether every detail is spot on doesn't matter as much as the truth of the experience, the emotional reality of a journey that pushed human limits in every way imaginable. From Troy, with a fleet of 12 ships and their crews, Odysseus first raids the land of the Cicons. This quick military adventure starts off well, but turns against the Greeks when reinforcements show up. It's a shift from the warrior world of the Iliad to the more complicated moral landscape of the Odyssey. The men grab loot, kill some, and take women captive, acting like typical conquering soldiers. Odysseus urges them to leave quickly, but his men want to feast on the beach, making themselves an easy target for a counterattack. When the Ciconian reinforcements arrive, the Greeks suffer heavy losses, 6 men from each ship, before they manage to escape back to sea. This small defeat hints at the bigger losses to come and sets a pattern. Odysseus often gives solid advice that his men ignore, leading to their downfall. Blown off course by storms, they next meet the Lotus Eaters, a people who live off a flower that brings peaceful forgetfulness. The men Odysseus sends to explore eat the lotus and lose all desire to return home, wanting only to stay and munch on more of the dreamy food. Odysseus has to drag them back to the ships, tie them under the benches, and demand an immediate departure. The Lotus Eaters don't pose a direct threat, but they represent a sneakier danger, the temptation to give up purpose, memory, and identity for the sake of comfort. This brief episode introduces a key theme of the epic, the struggle between the lure of forgetting and the painful need to remember. Throughout his travels, Odysseus will face this choice again and again, always opting for the tougher path back home. The next stop brings disaster on a whole new level. Arriving at the land of the Cyclopes giant, solitary shepherds without laws or community, Odysseus takes 12 men to check out a cave filled with cheese and milk. Even though his buddies urge him to grab some food and leave, Odysseus insists on waiting to see who owns the cave, hoping for some guest gifts. When Polyphemus, the Cyclops, comes back and finds the intruders, he shows a monstrous disregard for the gods. "We don't care about Zeus or the blessed gods," he growls at Odysseus before grabbing 2 men, smashing their heads against the ground and eating them raw. He then seals the cave entrance with a massive boulder and goes to sleep, trapping the survivors for a grim breakfast the next day. The Cyclops episode unfolds as a contest between brute strength and intelligence. Unable to move the boulder themselves, the Greeks cannot simply flee. Direct combat would likewise prove fatal against the giant's physical power. Odysseus must rely on stratagem, the quality that defines him. His plan proceeds in careful stages. First, he offers the Cyclops potent wine, loosening the monster's caution. When Polyphemus asks his name, Odysseus gives the cunning reply, "Nobody," Audis in Greek. Then, while the giant sleeps in drunken stupor, Odysseus and his men harden a massive wooden stake in the fire and drive it into the Cyclops' single eye. Polyphemus's agonized roar brings other Cyclopes to his cave. But when they ask who harmed him, he can only answer, "Nobody is killing me by craft, not force." Taking this literally, they depart, leaving him to his misery. Odysseus has weaponized language itself, using the ambiguity between a name and a negation to escape immediate retribution. To leave the cave, the Greeks cling to the undersides of the Cyclops' sheep as he lets them out to pasture, hiding among the dense wool where the blind giant can only feel along their backs. This escape demonstrates Odysseus's tactical creativity, finding the one path where the monster's remaining senses cannot detect them. Yet at the moment of apparent triumph, Odysseus makes a fatal error. Safe aboard his ship, pulling away from shore, he cannot resist the urge to mock Polyphemus and, most crucially, reveal his true name. "If any mortal asks who blinded you," he shouts, "tell them it was Odysseus, sacker of cities, son of Laertes, whose home is Ithaca." This moment of hubris transforms a tactical victory into a strategic catastrophe. Polyphemus, now knowing his attacker's identity, prays to his father Poseidon for vengeance. The sea god hears his son's plea, setting in motion the divine enmity that will cost Odysseus all his ships, all his men, and nearly a decade of wandering. The Cyclops episode is rich with symbolic dimensions. Polyphemus represents a pre-civilized existence, a world without agriculture, laws, assembly, or ships. His single eye suggests a limited perspective, unable to perceive depth or complexity. His dwelling in isolation, without community, reflects an existence contrary to Greek ideals of the polis. By blinding him, Odysseus asserts the superiority of civilization, strategy, and collective action over solitary brute force. Yet the episode also reveals Odysseus's fatal flaw, the pride in his own cleverness that drives him to claim credit for his deed. The name that he has spent the epic trying to live up to return to, becomes the very thing that extends his wanderings. Identity proves both essential and dangerous, a double-edged sword that cuts both ways. After escaping Polyphemus, Odysseus's fleet reaches the floating island of Aeolus, keeper of the winds. This divine host treats them hospitably for a month, then provides supernatural assistance for their journey home. A leather bag containing all contrary winds, leaving only the westerly breeze free to blow them straight to Ithaca. For 9 days, Odysseus personally mans the sheet, refusing sleep as they sail homeward. Success lies literally within sight. They draw close enough to Ithaca to see people tending fires on shore. At this pivotal moment, exhaustion finally overcomes the hero, and he falls into a deep slumber. His men, long suspicious of the mysterious bag which Odysseus has guarded closely, see their opportunity. Assuming it contains treasure their leader intends to keep for himself, they open it while he sleeps. The captive winds explode outward in a devastating storm that blows the fleet back across the sea to Aeolus's island. When Odysseus returns to request further help, Aeolus recoils in horror. Any man so clearly cursed by the gods, he reasons, deserves no assistance. This second rejection by Aeolus, refusing even to hear Odysseus's plea, emphasizes how one failure of trust compounds into greater isolation. The Aeolus episode reinforces the theme of nearly achieving home, only to face renewed exile. It also highlights the fatal dynamic between Odysseus and his men, his secrecy breeding their suspicion, their impulsiveness undermining his strategy. Neither fully trusts the other, creating a cycle of misunderstanding with tragic consequences. 6 days of rowing finally brings the exhausted fleet to the land of the Laestrygonians, a terrifying race of giant cannibals. Odysseus, being the cautious leader he is, keeps his own ship safely outside the harbor while sending scouts ahead to check things out. This smart move saves him, but unfortunately, it can't protect the rest of his fleet. The Laestrygonians attack, destroying 11 ships and devouring their crews, spearing the men like fish and hauling them off for a gruesome feast. Only Odysseus's ship manages to escape this nightmare. In just a few moments, he goes from commanding hundreds of men to just a handful, making his responsibility feel both lighter and heavier after such a catastrophic loss. The quick and brutal destruction of nearly his entire expedition marks the darkest point of his journey and sets the stage for the extended interlude on Circe's island that follows. With just one ship left and a crew that's growing more desperate by the day, Odysseus lands on Aea, the home of the enchantress Circe. He divides his remaining men into 2 groups and sends the first, led by his cousin Eurylochus, to explore. They stumble upon a palace surrounded by tame lions and wolves animals that have been transformed by Circe's magic. Inside, the goddess welcomes them with a feast filled with enchanted goodies. But after they eat, she waves her wand, turning all but Eurylochus, who had stayed outside, feeling suspicious, into pigs, keeping their human minds trapped in animal bodies. When Eurylochus comes back with this horrifying news, Odysseus knows he has to confront Circe himself. On his way, he meets Hermes, who gives him a magical herb called moly to protect against Circe's spells, along with some solid advice on how to handle her. Armed with this divine help, Odysseus faces the enchantress, resisting her magic, drawing his sword, and forcing her to promise not to harm him. What starts as a confrontation turns into an extended stay on Aea. Circe eventually turns the men back into humans, hosts them for a whole year of feasting, and becomes Odysseus's lover. This year of pleasure and relaxation seems to make the crew forget all about their mission to get home. It's only when his men finally push him to think about returning that Odysseus approaches Circe about leaving. But her response brings a new challenge. Before they can head home, she tells them they must journey to the land of the dead to consult the prophet Tiresias. This requirement for a catabasis, a descent into the underworld, adds a deep spiritual layer to Odysseus's journey. To move forward, he first has to confront death itself and the shadows of his past. Following Circe's detailed instructions, Odysseus sails to the western edge of the world, where the sun never shines and the rivers of the underworld flow into the ocean. There, he performs the necessary rituals, digging a pit, pouring libations, sacrificing animals, and letting their blood flow to attract the spirits of the dead. The shades gather, drawn by the scent of blood, but Odysseus holds them off with his sword until Tiresias arrives. The blind prophet drinks from the sacrificial blood and delivers his vital prophecy. He warns of the danger posed by Helios's cattle on Thrinacia, predicts Odysseus's eventual return to Athea and his confrontation with the suitors, and foretells a final journey inland, carrying an oar, seeking peoples who mistake it for a winnowing fan because they know nothing of the sea. After hearing the prophecy, Odysseus lets other spirits approach the blood and chat with him. His mother, Anticlea, who was alive when he left for Troy, shares that she died of grief during his long absence. She tries to embrace him 3 times, but just passes through his arms like smoke, a really heart-wrenching image of the unbridgeable gap between the living and the dead. Odysseus also meets famous women from myths and former buddies from Troy. The spirit of Agamemnon warns him to sneak back to Ithaca, trusting no one, not even his wife, after he was murdered by Clytemnestra and her lover. Achilles, who is all about glory and life, delivers one of the epic's most famous lines: "I'd rather be a hired worker on earth, serving a man with little property, than rule over all the dead." The most poignant moment is when Odysseus encounters Ajax, who took his own life after losing a contest with Odysseus over Achilles' armor. Even though Odysseus appeals to him, Ajax's spirit refuses to talk, holding on to the grudge that ended his life. This silent rejection hits home, reminding us of the human cost of Odysseus's competitive nature, how his victories sometimes leave deep wounds in others. The underworld sequence serves several purposes in the epic. It gives Odysseus vital knowledge for his journey home, reconnects him with his past, both personal and mythic, and highlights what's been lost and what's still at stake. It adds a deeper layer to his physical travels, suggesting that a true homecoming means reconciling with death and memory, not just physically returning to Ithaca. When Odysseus and his crew finally return to Aea, Circe gives them detailed guidance for the challenges ahead. She points out 3 specific dangers: the sirens, whose enchanting song lures sailors to their doom; the strait between Scylla and Charybdis, where they must choose to lose a few men or risk the whole ship; and the island of Thrinacia, home to Helios's sacred cattle, which they must leave untouched no matter how hungry they get. Armed with this knowledge, Odysseus prepares specific strategies for each threat. For the sirens, he has his men plug their ears with beeswax, while he himself is tied to the mast, letting him hear their song without being able to act on its deadly allure. This iconic image of the bound hero, straining against his ropes as he hears those irresistible voices, captures the heart of Odysseus's journey. He faces what could destroy others, but survives through foresight, discipline, and a willingness to accept temporary constraints. The siren song is revealing. They tempt Odysseus not with sensual pleasures, but with knowledge. "We know everything that happens on fertile earth," they claim. Their appeal hits his intellectual curiosity, his desire to know and understand, which has driven both his greatest successes and his biggest mistakes. By listening to their song, but resisting the urge to approach their island, Odysseus finds a rare balance between experience and restraint. Next comes one of the toughest decisions on this journey. To get home, Odysseus's ship has to navigate either through the strait where the 6-headed monster, Scylla, lives, or near the deadly whirlpool Charybdis. Circe has advised him to take the first option, saying, "Better to lose 6 men than the entire crew." Odysseus understands this harsh reality, but initially hides from his men that some of them are destined to die, no matter how skilled he is at sailing. As they near the strait, he readies himself for battle, even though Circe warned him that fighting Scylla is pointless. This choice shows his character. He knows he can't save everyone, but he won't just sit back and accept their fate. While the crew focuses on the more obvious threat of Charybdis, Scylla strikes out of nowhere, snatching 6 men right off the deck. Odysseus recounts their deaths in gut-wrenching detail, arms and legs flailing, their voices calling for him as they're pulled toward the monster's cave, their desperate struggles as they're devoured alive. Watching his friends die while still trying to steer the ship forward highlights the heavy burden of leadership, the responsibility to keep going, even when faced with unbearable loss. This encounter with Scylla strips away any glamour from heroism, showing its raw emotional toll. After surviving these dangers, the weary crew reaches Thrinacia, the island of the sun god's sacred cattle. Even though Tiresias and Circe warned them not to land there, a storm forces them ashore. Odysseus makes his men swear not to touch the cattle, no matter how tough things get. For a month, they survive on birds and fish. But when bad winds trap them on the island and their supplies run low, starvation becomes a real threat. When Odysseus goes inland to pray for help, his absence opens the door to temptation. Eurylochus convinces the starving crew that risking divine punishment is better than facing certain death. They kill the finest of Helios's cattle, promising sacrifices and offerings at the temple when they get home. Odysseus returns to find the deed already done. Even after performing the right rituals with the meat, strange signs appear. The hides of the slain animals crawl across the ground, and the meat itself seems to moo on the spit as if it's still alive. These eerie signs reveal just how serious their violation of cosmic order is. When they finally leave the island, Zeus keeps his promise to the furious Helios. A massive storm wrecks the ship, killing everyone on board except Odysseus, who manages to tie together the mast and keel to make a makeshift raft. He's swept back past Scylla and Charybdis, barely escaping the whirlpool by clinging to a fig tree on a cliff until his raft pops back up to the surface. After 9 days adrift, he finally arrives at Ogygia, Calypso's island, bringing his narrative full circle. At this low point, having lost his men, his ship, and what seemed like any hope of returning home, we've already seen him escape with divine help and reach the Phaeacians. As Odysseus wraps up his tale, a heavy silence fills the Phaeacian hall. This long personal narrative has shown sides of the hero that were hidden before. His decision-making process, how he deals with loss, and his moments of brilliance and mistakes. By letting Odysseus tell his own story, Homer gives him the power to shape his identity through his narrative, just as he'll have to rebuild who he is when he returns to Ithaca. The adventures Odysseus shares map out not just physical spaces, but also moral and psychological landscapes. Each challenge tests different aspects of human nature. The lure of forgetting with the Lotus Eaters, the clash between civilization and savagery with the Cyclops, the balance of trust and suspicion with Aeolus and his crew, the temptation of pleasure with Circe, the hunger for forbidden knowledge with the Sirens, the tough choices between losses with Scylla and Charybdis, and the desperate justifications that lead to tragic mistakes with Helios's cattle. Together, these stories create a rich exploration of human limits and desires. They reveal Odysseus as neither a flawless hero nor just a victim of fate, but as a man navigating impossible situations with both extraordinary skills and real flaws. His survival, when everyone else perishes, comes from a mix of divine favor, personal talent, and a bit of luck, a trio of factors the Greeks believed governed human fortune. As the Phaeacians get ready to take Odysseus back to Ithaca on ships, swift as thought itself, the wandering part of his journey comes to an end. Ahead lies an even bigger challenge, not just surviving among monsters and gods, but reclaiming his place in the human world he left behind 2 decades ago. The skills, insights, and determination he's gained from his travels will now be put to the test in the complicated social landscape of home. The Phaeacians totally deliver on their promise. Their amazing ship carries the sleeping Odysseus across the sea to Ithaca, where they gently place him and his newfound treasures on the shore before heading off. When Odysseus finally wakes up, he finds himself surrounded by moaning mist, struggling to recognize the very homeland he fought so hard to reach. This moment of confusion really captures a deep truth about coming home. After being away for so long, places change and our memories can be a bit unreliable. The returning traveler has to reconcile the home they imagined with the reality that hits them. For Odysseus, this process starts with a mix of uncertainty and despair. Has he been tricked, left on some strange shore with all his gifts? Then Athena shows up, first disguised as a young shepherd, before revealing herself to her favorite mortal. Their conversation highlights their special bond, blending divine support with mutual respect. When Athena asks why he doesn't recognize his homeland right away, Odysseus responds cautiously, spinning a false tale about his identity. The goddess smiles at his quick deception, noting with approval that anyone who could match Odysseus in cleverness would need to be a champion deceiver. Together, they stash his treasures in a nearby cave. Then Athena transforms him into an old beggar, bending his posture, wrinkling his skin, clouding his bright eyes, and dressing him in rags. This disguise serves multiple purposes. On one hand, it keeps him safe from the suitors who would kill him on sight. On the other, it lets him sneak around his palace unnoticed, testing loyalties before he reveals himself. Symbolically, it shows his in-between status. He's physically back in Ithaca, but hasn't yet reclaimed his true identity and position. Meanwhile, Athena heads off to Sparta to fetch Telemachus, who's been enjoying Menelaus's hospitality for maybe a bit too long. A young man, warned in a dream about the suitor's ambush, starts his journey home, mirroring his father's return, one of those clever parallel movements that really define the later books of the epic. Disguised as a beggar, Odysseus seeks out the home of his swineherd Eumaeus, following Athena's guidance. This humble hut, far away from the palace's corrupted splendor, becomes the launching pad for him to reclaim his kingdom. Here, Odysseus meets the first shining example of loyalty among his servants. Despite his ragged look, Eumaeus welcomes the stranger with open arms, sharing food, providing shelter, and treating him with dignity. This warm welcome is a stark contrast to how Odysseus will be treated by the suitors later, highlighting a central theme of the epic. True nobility shows in actions, not just birth or wealth. Eumaeus, though a slave, embodies the ethical code that the high-born suitors completely violate. His kindness to a seemingly lowly beggar reveals more genuine aristocratic values than the destructive entitlement of those in the palace. Over a simple meal, the disguised Odysseus and Eumaeus swap stories. Odysseus spins an elaborate tale about being a Cretan warrior who fought at Troy, faced all sorts of crazy adventures, and eventually heard news of Odysseus getting ready to come home. This clever storytelling shows off his improvisational skills while also letting him gather info without giving away who he really is. Eumaeus, however, is a bit skeptical about the news of his master's return. He's heard too many tall tales from travelers, just looking to get something out of it. But then he opens up about his own life. He shares that he was actually born a prince, kidnapped by Phoenician traders with the help of a sneaky nursemaid, and eventually sold to Laertes, who is Odysseus' dad. This back and forth creates a touching contrast. A nobleman living as a slave talks with the king disguised as a beggar, both of them temporarily cut off from their true identities. For several days, Odysseus stays with Eumaeus, soaking in the situation in Ithaca and getting to know the swineherd's solid character. This time in the countryside gives Homer a chance to paint a fuller picture of Ithaca beyond the palace, showing how Odysseus's long absence has impacted the community and economy. Through chats with Eumaeus and others, Odysseus learns how his herds have dwindled, how various servants have reacted to the crisis, and how the political landscape has changed while he's been gone. The calm of Eumaeus's hut is suddenly interrupted by the arrival of Telemachus, who has successfully dodged the suitors' sea ambush. Following Athena's guidance, he lands in a remote part of Ithaca and heads straight to Eumaeus instead of going back to the palace. This choice shows how much he's grown, a big change from the naive kid who left weeks ago. When Eumaeus steps out to tell Penelope that Telemachus is safe, Athena appears, visible only to Odysseus, and tells him to reveal himself to his son. With a wave of her wand, she briefly brings back his true appearance. The disguise falls away, and Odysseus stands before Telemachus as the strong, handsome, regal father he is. Telemachus's reaction is a mix of emotions and potential danger. At first, he thinks the transformation means he's looking at a god in disguise. He turns away, saying, "Just now you were old and shabbily clothed, but now you are like the gods who rule the wide heavens." But when Odysseus claims to be his long-lost father, Telemachus can't help but doubt, "You can't be my father, Odysseus. Some god is playing tricks on me to make my grief even worse." This struggle to recognize each other, fearing false hope after so many years of disappointment, makes their eventual embrace all the more powerful. When the truth finally sinks in, both men break down in tears. Homer compares their crying to the keening of eagles whose nestlings have been taken, a rare comparison that connects human emotion to the animal world, highlighting the deep bond of their reunion. Once the initial wave of emotion settles, father and son dive right into plotting how to deal with the suitors. This quick shift from a heartfelt reunion to scheming really highlights what's going on between them. It's not just a cozy homecoming, but a serious prep for some necessary action. Odysseus lays out his game plan, counting how many suitors are hanging around, figuring out who might help them, and giving Telemachus the lowdown on his role in the upcoming showdown. Even after being apart for 20 years, they quickly fall into a rhythm, working together towards their common goal with their unique strengths. Odysseus slips back into his beggar disguise before Eumaeus returns, keeping the act up for everyone except his son. They're all set to head into the palace, with Telemachus going first to keep things low-key, and Odysseus following later as just another random beggar looking for some charity. This way, Odysseus can get a good look at what's going on while also setting himself up for the big moment. Before they put this plan into action, Homer gives us a poignant moment with the story of Argos, Odysseus's once famed hunting dog, who was known for his speed and sharp senses, now lies forgotten on a pile of dung, old and covered in fleas. But when Odysseus walks by, Argos recognizes him instantly, despite the disguise that no one else can see through. With his last bit of strength, Argos wags his tail and perks up his ears, then passes away, having fulfilled his final duty, witnessing his master's return. This short but heart-wrenching scene is packed with meaning. It gives Odysseus a moment of clear recognition after all the doubt and trickery he's faced. It also shows how his household has fallen apart over time, and it reminds us that even the most loyal can't escape the toll of time. Most importantly, it shows how love can see through disguise when nothing else can, a theme that pops up again when the old nurse Euryclea recognizes Odysseus by his distinctive scar. Telemachus makes it back to the palace first, reuniting with Penelope, who hugs him tight, relieved but unaware of the huge changes about to unfold. Soon after, Eumaeus brings the disguised Odysseus to the palace, where he'll get a first-hand look at the chaos that's taken over his home. As they get closer, they run into Melanthius, another servant of Odysseus, who sided with the suitors. Unlike Eumaeus, Melanthius treats the disguised Odysseus with scorn, kicking him and mocking his ragged appearance. This interaction, in contrast to Eumaeus's kindness and Argos's recognition, sets the stage for the loyalty and betrayal Odysseus will have to navigate within his own household. As Odysseus steps into his palace as a beggar, he faces the ultimate humiliation of his journey, becoming a target for mockery and abuse in his own home. The suitors, especially their leader Antinous, are particularly cruel. When Odysseus asks for food, Antinous throws a footstool at him, hitting him in the back. This brutal act shows just how morally corrupt the suitors are. Not only are they squandering Odysseus's resources, but they're also ignoring the sacred duty to treat strangers and those in need with respect. Odysseus endures this mistreatment with a calm exterior that hides his growing anger. Each insult only fuels the justified rage that's building up inside him, ready to explode in a storm of retribution. Yet his ability to hold back shows incredible self-control. The same strength that helped him survive Polyphemus's cave and Calypso's island now helps him keep his disguise intact, even when provoked. Not everyone in the palace treats Odysseus with disdain. Penelope, upon hearing about the stranger's arrival and the mistreatment he endured, calls him over to ask if he has any news about Odysseus. Their chat is full of dramatic irony, as the queen doesn't realize she's talking to her own husband. Odysseus spins yet another tale, claiming he once hosted the real Odysseus years ago, and shares detailed predictions about his upcoming return. This moment between a disguised husband and a questioning wife really highlights the bittersweet nature of their situation. They're sitting close together, yet separated by lies and uncertainty. Odysseus has to hold back his urge to reveal himself, while Penelope wrestles with hope, sparked by the stranger's convincing words and the caution that comes from years of heartache. Their conversation gives us deeper insight into Penelope. We see her intelligence, her knack for getting information, and her emotional strength. When the disguised Odysseus describes clothing and companions from 20 years ago, she can't help but tear up at the memories. Yet she still doesn't make the final connection to the man right in front of her. The barriers to recognition aren't just about physical disguise. They also involve the psychological armor she's built to protect herself from false hope. This exchange also sets up the ultimate test Odysseus needs to pass to reclaim his place. Penelope announces that she'll hold a contest for the suitors. Whoever can string Odysseus's great bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axe handles will win her hand. This challenge is impossible for anyone but Odysseus himself, and sets the stage for the big showdown. Before the contest, there's one last recognition moment when the old nurse Euryclea bathes Odysseus's feet and spots a distinctive scar on his thigh, a mark from a boar hunt in his youth. Unlike Argos's silent recognition, this moment almost exposes Odysseus too soon. He quickly grabs her throat to hush her, warning her to keep his identity secret, even from Penelope. This partial recognition shows a pattern in the epic. Those with less power often see the truth more clearly. The dog, the nurse, and the swineherd all recognize parts of Odysseus that others overlook. Their loyalty isn't just about duty. It comes from genuine devotion, making them crucial allies in the upcoming restoration. As the day of the contest approaches, omens multiply. Zeus sends thunder from a cloudless sky. Theoclymenus, a seer who has taken refuge with Telemachus, experiences a horrific vision of the suitors, with blood-dripping walls, ghostly figures, and the sun darkening, a premonition of impending slaughter that the suitors mockingly dismiss. These supernatural signs reinforce the moral framework of the coming violence. The suitors' destruction is presented not merely as Odysseus's personal vengeance, but as divine justice, the inevitable consequence of their violations against home, hospitality, and proper social order. When Odysseus strings the bow and looses his arrow in the following books, he acts as an instrument of cosmic restoration, as much as a man reclaiming his own. Not everyone in the palace treats Odysseus with disdain. Penelope, upon hearing about the stranger's arrival and the mistreatment he endured, calls him over to ask if he has any news about Odysseus. Their chat is full of dramatic irony, as the queen doesn't realize she's talking to her own husband. Odysseus spins yet another tale, claiming he once hosted the real Odysseus years ago, and shares detailed predictions about his upcoming return. This moment between a disguised husband and a questioning wife really highlights the bittersweet nature of their situation. They're sitting close together, yet separated by lies and uncertainty. Odysseus has to hold back his urge to reveal himself, while Penelope wrestles with hope, sparked by the stranger's convincing words and the caution that comes from years of heartache. Their conversation gives us deeper insight into Penelope. We see her intelligence, her knack for getting information, and her emotional strength. When the disguised Odysseus describes clothing and companions from 20 years ago, she can't help but tear up at the memories. Yet she still doesn't make the final connection to the man right in front of her. The barriers to recognition aren't just about physical disguise. They also involve the psychological armor she's built to protect herself from false hope. This exchange also sets up the ultimate test Odysseus needs to pass to reclaim his place. Penelope announces that she'll hold a contest for the suitors. Whoever can string Odysseus's great bow and shoot an arrow through 12 axe handles will win her hand. This challenge is impossible for anyone but Odysseus himself, and sets the stage for the big showdown. Before the contest, there's one last recognition moment when the old nurse Euryclea bathes Odysseus's feet and spots a distinctive scar on his thigh, a mark from a boar hunt in his youth. Unlike Argos's silent recognition, this moment almost exposes Odysseus too soon. He quickly grabs her throat to hush her, warning her to keep his identity secret, even from Penelope. This partial recognition shows a pattern in the epic. Those with less power often see the truth more clearly. The dog, the nurse, and the swineherd all recognize parts of Odysseus that others overlook. Their loyalty isn't just about duty. It comes from genuine devotion, making them crucial allies in the upcoming restoration. Through these scenes, disguise becomes more than just a clever trick. It turns into a powerful metaphor for Odysseus's in-between status. He's physically there, but socially absent, hanging out on the edges of his own kingdom, seeing it all through the eyes of society's most powerless members. This experience changes him, deepening his understanding of loyalty, power, and justice beyond what he learned during his time as king. The beggar's rags also tie him to a deeper pattern in Greek heroic tradition, where disguise often leads to revelation, suffering leads to triumph, and descent leads to ascent. Just like Demeter searching for her daughter or Dionysus testing his followers, Odysseus uses his disguise to figure out who sees true worth beneath the surface and who judges based on appearances. As the day of the bow contest arrives, everyone is in place for the upcoming drama. Penelope has set up the selection process for the suitors, totally unaware that she's created the perfect chance for her husband's revenge. Telemachus stands as his father's ally while pretending to be neutral. Eumaeus and the loyal cowherd Philoetius are in the loop about Odysseus's identity and have joined his cause. The suitors, clueless about the looming danger, keep on partying. Odysseus, still in his beggar's rags, but ready for action, watches and waits for just the right moment to drop his disguise and reclaim his name, his home, and his throne. His long journey of wandering has come to an end, but the journey back to his true self is at its most dangerous point, the shift from disguised observer to avenging king. Dawn breaks on a day that will finally end 20 long years of separation and heartache. Penelope, still unaware that her husband is right there, announces a contest she's created. The great bow of Odysseus will be brought out, and whoever can string it and shoot an arrow through 12 axe heads lined up in a row will win her hand in marriage. This bow isn't just any bow. It's a meaningful gift from Iphitus, who was later killed by Heracles. It symbolizes Odysseus's past as a warrior and hunter. For 2 decades, it's been untouched, wrapped away like the man himself. Now, it's back as a tool for both challenge and revenge. When Eumaeus brings the bow into the hall, he can't help but weep at the sight of his master's weapon. Philoetius, the loyal cowherd who also recognizes the disguised Odysseus, joins in the tears. The suitors laugh at their emotions, completely unaware that these devoted servants are already on board for the upcoming revenge. The challenge is tough right from the start. None of the younger suitors can even bend the bow enough to string it. As they struggle, Odysseus watches closely, taking mental notes on each man's strengths and weaknesses while pretending to be just a bystander. Antinous, sensing the challenge, suggests they delay the contest. After all, it's a festival for Apollo, the god of archery, and they wouldn't want to offend him, right? This weak excuse shows how the suitors are realizing they can't even handle Odysseus's weapon, let alone replace him. At this pivotal moment, the disguised Odysseus quietly approaches Telemachus and subtly signals him to let the beggar try the bow. Telemachus, catching on to his father's plan, confidently asserts his right to decide who gets to use the bow. Ignoring the protests from the suitors, he instructs Eumaeus to bring the bow to Odysseus. As soon as the weapon is in his hands, the disguise starts to fade away. Homer paints a vivid picture of the beggar carefully inspecting the bow, checking for any worm damage and testing its flexibility like a musician tuning a lyre. This casual display of skill gives the first public clue about his true identity. With surprising ease, Odysseus strings the bow that has bested all the young suitors. The sound of the string tightening fills the hall, reminiscent of a swallow's song. Then, taking an arrow from his quiver, he lines it up perfectly and shoots through all 12 axe handles without missing, a stunning display of accuracy that leaves everyone in stunned silence. Amidst the stunned quiet, Odysseus gives Telemachus the signal for action. The young man girds himself with sword and spear, taking position beside his father. Only then does Odysseus cast off the final elements of his disguise. Standing tall on the threshold of his hall, a symbolically charged position connecting different domains. He announces himself. The contest is ended. Now for another target that no man has yet hit. With these words, he looses an arrow directly into Antinous' throat as the suitor lifts a wine cup to his lips. The leader of the suitors falls backward, blood spurting from his nostrils, his foot kicking the table and spilling food across the floor. This graphic detail, the feast becoming bloodied, The wine cup falling from lifeless hands establishes the shocking transition from revelry to slaughter. The remaining suitors are left in a state of confusion, thinking the killing must be an accident. I mean, who would expect a beggar to kill a nobleman, right? But then, when Odysseus finally reveals who he really is, they realize just how serious their situation is. You dogs, you thought I wouldn't come back from Troy ... You ate up my home, took advantage of my servants, and chased after my wife while I was still alive, showing no fear of the gods or any consequences. Now, death is coming for all of you. This moment shifts everything from just revenge to real justice, restoring the balance of divine and human law against those who crossed every line. Eurymachus, attempting to diffuse Odysseus's wrath, offers compensation, restitution for all they've consumed, plus 20 oxen from each suitor. Odysseus rejects this belated offer out of hand. No payment can atone for their transgressions. Only blood will suffice. His refusal underscores the moral economy of the epic. Some violations go beyond material compensation, requiring the ultimate payment. Realizing negotiation has failed, the suitors draw their swords and look for shields. But Telemachus has already removed the armor from the hall on his father's instructions. Eumaeus charges Odysseus, but falls with an arrow through his liver. Amphinomus rushes forward next, only to be speared in the back by Telemachus. What follows is a methodical slaughter. Odysseus continues firing arrows until his quiver empties, dropping suitors with each shot. Telemachus fetches additional weapons for his father, himself, and the loyal servants who have joined them, Eumaeus and Philodius. The doors are secured, trapping the remaining suitors inside. The fighting becomes desperate as the outnumbered attackers face the remaining suitors. Athena appears in the form of mentor to encourage Odysseus, though she does not immediately grant victory. Instead, she tests the aging hero's strength and courage before finally intervening more directly. This divine restraint emphasizes that even with godly favor, human effort remains essential. Homer does not glorify the violence, but renders it with unflinching detail. Men fall with spears through their throats, swords piercing their chests, heads cleaved by bronze. The floor runs with blood. Men slip in gore as they try to flee. The hall echoes with death groans and the thud of falling bodies. This graphic depiction emphasizes the gravity of the suitors' transgressions. Their pleasant parasitism has culminated in horrific consequences. The battle peaks when Odysseus and his small band face off against the remaining suitors, led by Agelaus. Athena finally displays her aegis, the fearsome shield bearing the Gorgon's head from the rafters, filling the suitors with supernatural panic. Like cattle driven by a stinging fly, they scatter in terror, only to be cut down one by one. The simile of hunted animals appears repeatedly. The suitors become like fish gasping on shore, like doves caught in a net, emphasizing their sudden transformation from predators to prey. Mercy comes for only two individuals. The bard Phemius, who had entertained the suitors under compulsion, begs for his life, claiming he served in the palace unwillingly. Similarly, the herald maiden, who had shown kindness to Telemachus, pleads for clemency. Telemachus intercedes for both, demonstrating temperance amidst the bloodshed and establishing himself as a worthy, ethical heir to his father. When the fighting ends, the hall resembles a shoreline after a bloody tide, littered with corpses like fish strewn across sand. Odysseus, spattered with blood, and gore like a lion that has feasted on an ox. orders the disloyal serving women to clean the hall under Telemachus's supervision. These women, 12 in number, who had slept with the suitors and betrayed the household, are then taken outside and hanged in a grim extension of the purge. For the treacherous goatherd Menelaus, who had mocked and abused the disguised Odysseus and helped arm the suitors during the battle, an even harsher punishment awaits. His nose, ears, hands, and feet are cut off, and his genitals thrown to the dogs, a mutilation that expresses the extremity of his betrayal in physical terms. After this brutal cleansing, Odysseus orders the hall to be fumigated with burning sulfur, a ritual purification that serves both practical sanitation and symbolic cleansing. The physical space that had been corrupted by the suitor's presence must be ritually reclaimed before normal life can resume. Euryclea, the old nurse who had recognized Odysseus earlier, brings the loyal serving women to welcome their returned master. They surround him, kissing his head and hands, embracing him with tears of joy. This moment of tender reunion, amid the aftermath of slaughter, creates a powerful emotional counterpoint. The restoration of proper order brings not just justice, but reconnection with those who remained faithful. Yet for all its cathartic violence and emotional reunion, this sequence represents only partial restoration. Odysseus has reclaimed his palace and eliminated the internal threat, but he has not yet reclaimed his marriage. Penelope, who had retired to her chambers before the contest, remains unaware of the bloody events and her husband's true identity. When Euryclea rushes to inform Penelope that Odysseus has returned and slain the suitors, the queen's response is not immediate joy, but studied skepticism. Having protected herself from disappointment for so many years, she cannot simply surrender to hope. She suggests alternatively that some god must have killed the suitors, or that the beggar must be someone else entirely. This final resistance to recognition creates the framework for the epic's most intimate and psychologically nuanced scene. After 20 years of separation, after a blood-soaked reclamation of his household, Odysseus must still face his most challenging test, convincing his brilliant, cautious wife that he has truly returned. The bow contest and slaughter of the suitors transforms the epic from a story of wandering to one of justice restored. It fulfills the prophecies of Tiresias and the divine will expressed since the poem's opening. Yet it also raises profound questions about violence, retribution, and restoration that the final books must address. The bloodshed has cleansed the palace, but healing the community, reestablishing political order, and truly reclaiming intimate relationships requires more than physical triumph. As night falls on the blood-soaked hall, Odysseus has eliminated his enemies, but stands on the threshold of his most meaningful homecoming, the reunion with a wife whose loyalty and intelligence match his own. This final recognition scene, approached with caution by both husband and wife, will determine whether Odysseus has truly returned home in the fullest sense of restoration. The blood has been cleaned from the palace floors, the suitors' bodies have been taken away by their families, and the disloyal servants have faced their punishment. But the most important reunion is still ahead, the moment when husband and wife truly recognize each other, completing Odysseus's long-awaited homecoming. Penelope steps down from her chamber, her mind still swirling with doubt. For 20 long years, she's been walking a tightrope between hope and despair, never fully accepting that Odysseus is gone, yet afraid to believe he's back. This emotional balancing act, matching her husband's physical endurance, has kept her strong and protected her heart. Now, with whispers of Odysseus's return, she approaches with caution, not wanting to risk her hard-won peace for what might just be another letdown. As she enters the hall, she spots a stranger by the fire, cleaned up and dressed well, but he doesn't immediately look like her husband. Even though Telemachus insists this man is Odysseus, she holds back. "My child," she tells her frustrated son, "if he truly is Odysseus come home, we will know each other better than anyone, for we have signs known only to the two of us." This insistence on private confirmation instead of public claims shows Penelope's wisdom. Throughout the epic, identities have been fluid and deceptive. Odysseus himself has worn many masks. Gods have taken on human forms. Appearances have often misled. So, Penelope's caution isn't just stubbornness. It's a smart skepticism, mirroring Odysseus's own wariness with the Phaeacians, Athena, and everyone else he's met. Odysseus, eager for recognition, respects her caution. When Telemachus calls out his mother's coldness, Odysseus stands up for her. "Let your mother test me as she will." This shared respect for caution highlights their deep connection, each seeing in the other a mind that doesn't jump to conclusions. To set the stage for their reunion, Odysseus plans a little trick for anyone watching the palace from outside. He arranges for music and dancing, ensuring that passers-by hear sounds of celebration instead of the grim aftermath of the slaughter. This clever ruse, a mock wedding feast, hiding the scene of carnage, creates a cover for the heartfelt reunion that's about to happen. Penelope instructs the servants to prepare the royal bed for the stranger, subtly laying a trap. When Odysseus reacts with controlled anger, the trap snaps not on him, but on any impostor who might claim to be her husband. "Woman," he exclaims, "you cut me to the heart. Who has moved my bed? No man alive, not even in full strength, could easily move it, for I built that bed myself, and a great secret went into its making." He goes on to describe how he crafted their marriage bed around a living olive tree that grew within the palace walls, constructing the room around this solid, natural centerpiece. This bed, impossible to move without destroying it, symbolizes their marriage, deeply rooted, skillfully made, and built to last. This revelation finally breaks through Penelope's caution. The details of the bed's construction were known only to the two of them and one loyal servant. No impostor could possess this knowledge. The sign she was looking for, proof beyond mere appearance or strength, has come in the most intimate way possible, knowledge of the foundation of their marriage. Penelope's skepticism shifts to overwhelming emotion. Her knees buckle, her heart softens, and tears stream down her face. She rushes to Odysseus, wrapping her arms around him and kissing his head. "Please don't be angry with me for holding back," she begs. "My heart always feared that someone might deceive me with words, for many have plotted against us." Odysseus weeps in return, embracing the wife he has yearned for during his long journey. Homer likens Penelope's welcome to the sight of land for a drowning sailor, the same metaphor used earlier for Odysseus reaching the Phaeacian shore after his shipwreck. This repetition hints that his physical salvation was incomplete without this emotional homecoming. Only now, recognized by the one who knows him best, has Odysseus truly returned. Their reunion stretches late into the night as they share their stories from the years apart. Odysseus talks about his adventures tales we've heard him tell the Phaeacians, but they take on a new meaning when he shares them with Penelope. She opens up about her long fight against the suitors, the clever tricks she played, her delays, and how she held on to hope even when doubt crept in. This exchange isn't just about catching up. It's about weaving their separate stories into a shared history, bridging the 20 years that have come between them through a deep understanding of each other's struggles and resilience. They rekindle the bond that's the heart of their relationship. As dawn approaches, Athena pauses the morning, stretching their night of reconnection even longer. This divine touch, bending time itself for their reunion, highlights just how significant their bond is in the grand scheme of things. When they finally come together physically, it's more than just satisfying their desires. It's about restoring the natural order for both humans and gods. But with morning comes the harsh reality that their challenges aren't over. The families of the slain suitors are out for revenge, and that could spark a civil war in Ithaca. Odysseus also needs to visit his aging father, Laertes, who has retreated to a farm on the island's edge, living in sorrow and neglect as he mourns his lost son. Plus, there's Tiresias' prophecy hanging over him. Odysseus must embark on another journey inland, carrying an oar, until he meets people who mistake it for a winnowing fan because they know nothing of the sea. The reunion with Laertes brings another wave of emotion. Odysseus finds his father digging around a fruit tree, dressed in worn clothes, his hands rough from labor that doesn't fit his royal background. This self-imposed hardship, a visible sign of his grief, really touches Odysseus. Yet again, he approaches this reunion with a bit of a test instead of just revealing himself right away. He pretends to be a stranger who once hosted Odysseus. This last deception is too much for the old man. Hearing his son still spoken of as missing, Laertes pours dust over his head in mourning. That sight shatters Odysseus' composure. He rushes to embrace his father, revealing who he truly is, and proving it by recalling every tree in the orchard that Laertes had given him as a boy, creating a vivid picture of their shared past. This scene, following the intense climax of the suitor's slaughter and the emotional reunion with Penelope, shows how expansive the idea of homecoming is in the epic. Odysseus' return isn't truly complete without reconnecting with his father, symbolizing both his roots and his future. It brings together 3 generations: Laertes, Odysseus, and Telemachus, who joins them at the farm. This continuity helps balance out the disruption caused by Odysseus' 20-year absence. Meanwhile, word about the suitor's death spreads like wildfire through Ithaca. Families are gripped by grief and anger as they gather the bodies for funeral rites. Eupides, Antinous' father, steps up as a leader, rallying the others for revenge against Odysseus. Even with some more level-headed voices reminding them that the suitors brought this on themselves, many are gearing up for a fight. This brewing civil conflict threatens to overshadow Odysseus' hard-won victory with more bloodshed. As the vengeful group makes its way to Laertes' farm, where Odysseus and his small crew have taken refuge, the stage is set for yet another round of violence, a blood feud that ancient Greek society knew all too well. But then, the gods decide to step in. Zeus and Athena are having a chat up on Olympus, agreeing that enough blood has already been spilled. Just as the fighting kicks off, Athena swoops down to the battlefield. She lets a little fighting happen first, even giving the elderly Laertes a moment of glory when he takes out Eupides with a spear, but then she puts a stop to it all with a booming command. Her divine power, backed by Zeus's thunderbolt, forces both sides to drop their weapons. This divine intervention brings a much-needed peace to what could have spiraled into an endless cycle of revenge. Homer shows us that when left to their own devices, human societies often get stuck in a loop of retaliation. The gods stepping in symbolizes the need for something greater to break that cycle, much like how legal systems and third-party justice would eventually replace blood vengeance in Greek culture. A formal agreement is made between Odysseus and the families of the suitors, with Athena, disguised as mentor, overseeing the oaths. This political resolution goes hand in hand with the personal restoration he achieved through his reunions with Penelope and Laertes. Odysseus has not only reclaimed his household, but also his kingdom, fully reintegrating into his roles as husband, father, son, and king. This rich restoration really captures the essence of Nostos, or homecoming, that has been at the heart of the story since the beginning. But here's the thing. Homer makes it clear that Odysseus's journey isn't fully wrapped up. Tiresias's prophecy about his inland journey is still hanging in the air, a future task that will eventually pull our hero away from home again. This sense of unfinished business hints that even the best homecoming carries the potential for future departures. Odysseus, the guy who's been through so much, may find some stability, but he'll never truly settle down. This open-ended vibe sets the Odyssey apart from stories that tie everything up neatly. Homer dives deep into the complex nature of homecoming, its physical, emotional, social, and political aspects, reminding us that no return is ever absolute or permanent. As Odysseus reclaims his spot at the center of his world, his marriage, family, household, and kingdom, the horizon of new adventures is always in sight. This push and pull between arriving and leaving, between reconnecting and the certainty of future goodbyes, gives the epic its enduring impact. Odysseus's tale reflects not just the trials of an ancient hero, but the universal human quest for home, all while recognizing its fleeting nature and cherishing connections, because we know how fragile they can be. The final image of Athena bringing peace really captures this deep balance, right? It shows how divine intervention can create a resolution that human effort alone just can't achieve. But here's the thing. This intervention responds to human struggle instead of replacing it. The gods recognize Odysseus's incredible perseverance by giving him the peace that his own actions couldn't secure, finishing what he started after 2 decades of relentless effort to return home. This cooperation between human striving and divine grace, between what we do and the bigger cosmic picture, is where the Odyssey finds its true meaning. Odysseus's journey, both physical and spiritual, geographical and emotional, maps out the full landscape of human experience against a backdrop of divine purpose. His homecoming isn't just a personal win. It's about restoring the relationship between the mortal and immortal worlds, rebalancing a universe thrown into chaos by war, absence, and mistakes. As we leave Odysseus, finally at peace in Ithaca, and recognized by those who matter most, we see why his story has lasted for 3,000 years. His determination to return, his willingness to face incredible hardships without losing who he is, and his ability to adapt while staying true to himself, show us the best of human resilience. In the joy of his hard-won homecoming, despite past suffering and future obligations, we catch a glimpse of the priceless reward of belonging, of being known, and of finally coming home. With Odysseus back on his throne in peace in Ithaca, you'd think that's the end of the story, right? But nope. The Odyssey was just starting its adventure through human culture. Like its clever hero, this epic has traveled far and wide, changing with the times, but staying true to its core essence. The poem kicked off its influence in ancient Greek culture. Together with the Iliad, it was a key text serving as entertainment, a moral guide, a history lesson, and even a religious reference. Kids learned to read with Homer's lines, and public recitations brought folks together. Politicians even quoted Homer to back up their points. These epics created a shared cultural language that helped unite the often divided Greek city-states. As Greek civilization spread through Alexander's conquests and later through Roman culture, Homer's impact grew. The Romans translated and adapted his works extensively. Virgil's Aeneid, Rome's national epic, was directly inspired by Homer, especially in its themes of fate and homecoming. Thanks to this solid foundation, Homer's legacy survived the medieval period, even when many ancient texts were lost. While direct knowledge of Homer faded in Western Europe during those years, his stories lived on through Latin summaries and adaptations, with Byzantine scholars keeping the original Greek texts safe and sound in the Eastern Mediterranean. The Renaissance brought Homer back into the spotlight, fueled by a renewed interest in classical learning. After the fall of Constantinople in 1453, Greek manuscripts made their way to Western Europe, and scholars jumped at the chance to create fresh translations and commentaries. Homer quickly became a must-read for anyone wanting an education, shaping literature, art, and philosophy of the time. Each era found its own connection to the Odyssey. During the age of exploration, people compared Odysseus to navigators, discovering new lands. The Romantic period highlighted the poem's emotional richness and stunning imagery of nature. Victorian scholars even debated the historical truths behind the myths. Modernist writers saw Odysseus's fragmented journey as a reflection of the chaos of modern life. A standout response came from James Joyce in 1922 with his novel Ulysses, which cleverly maps the Odyssey's events onto a single day in Dublin. This approach shows just how deeply the Odyssey is woven into the fabric of Western literature, proving its themes are still relevant today. Beyond literature, the Odyssey has made its mark on just about every artistic medium you can think of. From ancient Greek vase painters to Renaissance geniuses and even modern abstract artists, scenes from this epic have been brought to life in stunning ways. Composers have crafted operas, symphonies, and song cycles inspired by its tales. Sculptors have frozen moments of Odysseus's adventures in stone and bronze. And filmmakers? They've either adapted the story directly or borrowed its structure for their own original narratives. But the influence doesn't stop at the arts. It stretches into psychology, philosophy, and politics too. Psychoanalysts have looked to Odysseus's journey as a way to understand the human mind, with his battles against external monsters reflecting our internal struggles. Philosophers from Aristotle to Heidegger have used the epic to dive into big questions about identity, ethics, and what it means to be human. Political theorists have examined how it portrays leadership, community, and the balance between individual achievement and social responsibility. Our everyday language is sprinkled with phrases from this ancient poem. Terms like siren song, between Scylla and Charybdis, and lotus eater pop up in conversation, often without people realizing their Homeric roots. The very idea of an Odyssey as a long, tough journey has grown beyond its original meaning to become a universal metaphor. So, what keeps this story alive and kicking across the ages? Maybe it's the Odyssey's unique mix of opposites, adventure and homecoming, individualism and community, fantasy and reality, divine help and human effort. Unlike many hero tales that focus only on battles or the supernatural, the Odyssey captures both the extraordinary and the everyday, blending cosmic forces with the intimacy of human relationships. Odysseus embodies this balance, facing gods and monsters while still being relatable in his desires, flaws, and connections. His greatest strength is his adaptability, making him timeless and relevant in countless cultural contexts. He's the hero who thrives not through unchanging might, but through constant transformation, making him the perfect protagonist for our ever-evolving world. The poem's exploration of homecoming goes beyond just its historical setting. The push and pull between wandering and returning, between diving into the unknown and holding on to what feels familiar, taps into a basic human experience that resonates across cultures and ages. With the world becoming more mobile and borders blurring, the Odyssey's take on what home means is more relevant than ever. Plus, the epic storytelling is super sophisticated. Its intricate timeline, shifts in viewpoint, and mix of genres, from adventure to romance to family drama, create a depth that invites endless reinterpretation. Each generation finds fresh angles to highlight and new ways to understand it. Feminist readings shine a light on Penelope's strength and the gender dynamics at play in the household. Post-colonial perspectives dig into how foreign lands and people are depicted through the eyes of the Greek insider. Psychological interpretations dive into the inner struggles Odysseus faces alongside his external challenges. This flexibility in interpretation also shows up in translation. The Odyssey has been translated into nearly every major language, often in various versions that reflect different takes on the original text. Every new translation brings its own interpretation, emphasizing different elements of Homer's rich work. Some translations focus on the poem's oral roots and performance aspects, while others highlight its storytelling drive, poetic imagery, or philosophical ideas. In English, the translation tradition ranges from George Chapman's lively Elizabethan version to Alexander Pope's graceful couplets, from Richmond Lattimore's precise scholarship to Robert Fitzgerald's modern poetic flair, and from Robert Fagles' accessible style to Emily Wilson's focus on narrative pace and contemporary relevance. Each translation effectively creates a new poem that converses with both the ancient, original, and the translator's present-day context. This ongoing cycle of reinterpretation and retranslation keeps the Odyssey alive, making it a dynamic cultural force that evolves with changing social landscapes. Each era interprets the poem differently, yet something fundamental remains constant across these varied readings, some core truth about human experience that transcends time. Maybe this essence lies in the poem's deep humanity. It acknowledges that even a hero blessed by the gods must face the universal challenges of identity, relationships, and mortality. Odysseus encounters supernatural threats, but also grapples with the everyday struggles of aging, family tensions, and community issues. His journey reflects both our vulnerabilities and our resilience, recognizing that while we're often subject to forces beyond our control, we also have the power to take meaningful action within those limits. In today's world of rapid change and global mobility, where ideas of home, identity, and community are constantly shifting, the Odyssey doesn't just long for fixed origins or blindly accept endless wandering. Instead, it suggests that a meaningful identity needs both movement and return, adaptation and continuity, along with a balance of individual achievement and social connection. This fresh perspective might just explain why the Odyssey keeps inspiring not only scholarly analysis, but also creative responses all around the globe. Think about it: modern authors like Derek Walcott in the Caribbean, Margaret Atwood in Canada, Nikos Kazantzakis in Greece, and Ralph Ellison in America have all tapped into the epic's themes and structures. They see Odysseus as a figure who can tackle today's big questions about displacement, belonging, and identity. The Odyssey isn't just some old relic. It's like a lively conversation partner in our ongoing cultural chat. When we read, hear, or watch adaptations of this ancient tale, we're joining one of humanity's longest-running intellectual traditions, tradition that connects us across time and space to countless others who found meaning in this story of wandering and returning. As we leave Odysseus settled in Ithaca, we realize that his journey, much like the poem itself, holds the promise of more adventures. Tiresias' prophecy hints at future travels, and the ongoing translations and adaptations keep this cultural journey alive. The hero may find rest, but his story keeps sailing on, exploring the vast sea of human experience in all its ups and downs, its joy and sorrow, its complexity and beauty. Just like Odysseus, we're all caught between wandering and homecoming, exploration and connection, transformative experiences and lasting identity. In this balance, the Odyssey resonates through the ages, speaking to us across 3,000 years with a voice that feels like our own, sharing a story that, despite its ancient roots, feels deeply familiar. And so, our journey into the past comes to a quiet close. If you're still awake with me, I hope this tale brought you a little peace. If you enjoyed our time together, a gentle like lets me know. And subscribing means you'll never miss the next calm adventure. If you know someone who might need a little comfort tonight, feel free to share this story with them. Thank you, truly, for being here. Until next time, I wish you the sweetest dreams.